Hello, and welcome to Dyslexia Devoted, the podcast dedicated to building awareness, understanding, and strategies to help those with dyslexia. I'm your host, Lisa Parnello, dyslexia therapist and founder of Parnello Education Services. Join me as we dive into today's episode of Dyslexia Devoted. Hello, and welcome to episode 106 of Dyslexia Devoted. In episode 104, we talked about the importance of having structure and routines. Now, for episode 106, we're going the complete opposite direction with when to be flexible. So every summer, there's always a little bit of lax routine. Things are all over the place because kids have different camps at different times, or they go on vacation at different times. And I've just learned it is all routines go out the window, but we try to have a routine. Like we will have our session twice a week, even if it's not always at the exact same time. Or we will have it twice a week at the same time, except for these 1 or 2 random weeks while they're on a trip or at a cool camp or something. But this year, we're in like a whole other ballgame. This year, there has been an ultimate test of my ability to be flexible. And every day, there is something that goes just awry. I was chatting with a nanny who I communicate with an awful lot over the last several years, and we've become quite friendly with one another. And I was giving her the list of all the reasons I've had to do last minute cancellations with other kids, so I understand why they need to do some flex on their end this week. And the reasons are just so funny to me. One kid was planned to be doing Zoom remotely while they were away on vacation for the summer, but they were on an island without reception, so we don't get to work together. Another kid knocked a tooth out. Somebody else forgot to come. And another family missed their plane. And then the reason I'm recording this podcast right now is I'm at work way, way, way too early. Like over an hour earlier than I really need to be at work today. Because they are currently tearing up my street for, repaving or something. I don't know. They are going to be tearing up my street for an entire week. So not just like a day. And so I don't really know what I'm going to go home to. But I do know that I'm not allowed to be at my house or on my block after 7 a.m. So I had to leave for work very early today. And all of these crazy things this week has helped me to see one of the new topics we really need to cover, which is when to be flexible. Because we can absolutely thrive on our routines and structure, and kids do so much better if we can have routines and structure and predictability. But also, life is not predictable. There are things you cannot plan, like if you knock out a tooth. And I don't mean a cute little baby tooth, I mean a full-blown teenager tooth. So let's talk about how we know when we need to be flexible. What are those instances where we should be flexible? And more importantly, when are those incidences where we do not be flexible? Because there is a difference between flexing when kids need it and flexing when they demand it. So let's go into flexing when they need it first. When I'm working with kids with dyslexia, I often make a point of teaching them, especially as they start getting older, different times to use their accommodations depending on the situation. Because sometimes they've become pretty good readers with all of our work together. So they can read, they can spell, they can do all these things. But there are times when it's going to be harder for you. So some of those times would be if you're reading about a completely new topic that you've never heard of and there's so much vocabulary you've never heard of before. That's one where you should just listen to it so you can focus more on the content that's being covered and less on sounding out these unfamiliar words. Because if it's not a test in decoding skills and it's really just information you're supposed to learn, then that's one of those things you want to put all your energy to understanding the information. I've also taught them that times when they are sick or times that they are overtired, those are also times they should rely on their accommodations. Their dyslexia will always feel worse in those times because their brain doesn't have its full energy capacity. Because it takes their brains a lot of work to do these things, even if they've successfully been remediated. Dyslexia is not something that goes away. And even though you can have a student be tested out of dyslexia and say they have remediated dyslexia, which by the way is a real diagnosis, it is when a kid has a case history of having dyslexia, but they have gotten such good intervention and remediation that now they're within their normal range of what they should be able to do at this age level. So while a student can work their way up to being average within the range of what they should be able to do, that does not mean that that is in every moment of every day. That means on a really good day when everything's going well, they can keep up just like everybody else. but that doesn't account for how much work it takes for them to do that. So that's where accommodations really come in for these kids who know how to read, but sometimes they're just too tired. They just don't have that much left in the tank, and they need to use an accommodation. So that is one example of using flexibility. Another one is I've got a student that has a really low frustration tolerance. They give up really easily for good reason, because reading was really difficult for a really long time, and that student wasn't getting the instruction that they needed at the pace that they needed, and so they just really couldn't do the full amount every day. So yesterday, she did an amazing job of telling me ahead of time, hey, I'm getting tired. Can we do just 2 sentences at the end for spelling instead of 3? Which just asking that and knowing how to politely ask for what she felt she needed is a huge win. So this is a time where I will be flexible. If a student has a history of having some sort of shutdown reaction, whatever that looks like for that child, sometimes it means they start being silly, sometimes it means they start giving up and shutting down, sometimes it means they suddenly have an excuse to go to the bathroom. So in instances where a student very politely asks for what they need, those are the times that I flex, when they do it in a really appropriate way. So the way I flexed is I did not give her 2 sentences, but I told her we could do 3 shorter sentences. And so I adjusted my plan to do what skills I wanted her to do, and I made sure the spelling patterns within those 3 sentences still had the exact words I needed her to spell to demonstrate her understanding of the spelling pattern. But we did 3 sentences, but they were a little shorter. I took out a couple adjectives and things like that, just to make sure that I was able to get her to continue her lesson as planned and to reward her for being able to advocate for herself and speak up in a really polite, calm way. Another time is some of the kids this week have been traveling. And so when they come back from traveling, a lot of them were exhausted. One of them was on a delayed flight and ran into my office at the very last minute, actually maybe 5 or 10 minutes late. They told me they were coming late because their plane was super delayed. But the kid came in, showed up, worked hard, and was like, I'm sorry, I'm just really tired and maybe kind of jet lagged. It's like 10 o'clock in Florida right now. And I was really proud of this kid because he came in, he showed up, and he did his best. And that was enough. I don't care how many mistakes you make. My flex in that instance is knowing that if you just show up, sometimes showing up is all you got in you. And that's when I become more flexible. They're coming, they're having a good attitude, and they're trying their best. Their best today may not look the same as their best tomorrow when they're well rested. So that is another time when we flex, when we can see that there's something inhibiting them from doing their best. Yesterday, I had a kid show up without a voice. For some perspective, we're having heat waves around here, and there are spare the air alerts, which are when there's like more pollution and stuff in the air, and it happens a lot around here when it gets really hot because the smog just kind of just floats in the air. And this kiddo showed up without a voice yesterday. He clearly wasn't sick anymore. He had been sick, a couple weeks ago, but his voice, non-existent. So that was another time I flexed. We were supposed to do more reading out loud, but instead I changed my plan and we did some more spelling and then practiced math facts, which is a separate item that sometimes he needs help with and sometimes he doesn't. So I decided that was a good day for us to do quiet math fact practice that didn't require him to speak. So these are all great examples of times when we need to flex. Life doesn't always go to plan, and we need to flow with that sometimes, even if our main goal most of the time is to stick to our structure and routines. And if you listen carefully, a lot of what I did really was staying within my normal structure and routines. The kid who was tired and we did less work, we really did the same work. We still wrote sentences, but we adjusted how we did them. The student who didn't have a voice, we still did our reading and our spelling. We just did in a little bit shorter amounts and then added in a different skill to practice that didn't require talking. The kiddo who was tired and jet lagged, we still did our plan. We just did it slower with less problems than normal. And this is where, when we flex, we try to keep it within the bounds of the plan as much as we can. There are definitely times where we scrap the plan. There were days that I will plan something, I start to do it, and I realize this is just not what we're going to do today. There was one of the kiddos was having a really off day, and we were planning on starting something brand new. And I decided, nope, today we're going to do one more day of review of the last thing we learned. Because I can see just by the look on your face, nothing new is going to go into your brain very well today, and this is just not going to work. So there are times that we do completely scrap the plan. But let's talk about when we don't scrap the plan. We do not scrap the plan when students or children demand it. I say students or children depending on who you are in relation to them. Are you their teacher or are you their mom or dad or caregiver, whoever? When students or children scream at you and demand that you do something, that is not when you flex. That is when you hold firm. We had one student in my class one year who was newer to my class. I think they had joined mid-year or something like that. And they started very strongly misbehaving when I didn't give them something that they wanted. And all of a sudden, we see 2 or 3 other kids turn to them and go, "You better not do that. Even if she was going to give it to you, you're certainly not going to get it now." Because they have learned, if you are having a temper tantrum, I will make sure you do not get what you want. Because when you give somebody what they want in the middle of a tantrum, that means the next time they want something, oh, you know how I'm going to get it? I'm going to throw a tantrum. I'm going to be mean and rude and disrespectful, and then when you've had enough of me, that's when you will cave and give me what I want. That's what they learn from that. So I make sure anytime a student is being extremely disrespectful, they will never get what they want. I will make sure of it, even if it was already my plan to give it to them. But I will give it to them when they are calm, when they are asking politely, when they are using their words respectfully. That's when I give them what they want. That's when I adjust my plan, is when they show me that they can say, "Hey, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. Can I please take a break?" Sure, absolutely. But if you're screaming at me and throwing a pillow at me, that's probably not when you're going to get anything. But if we can teach the kids when we flex is when they behave appropriately, that is really what leads to more appropriate requests for whatever they need. I saw a student scream at their parent yesterday, and I lost it on them and said, "You do not behave like that in my office. This is not how we are behaving." Because this student has learned if they scream, they get what they want. But we set boundaries, and wherever you are, you can set the boundary for this place. This might be okay when you're in that place, but this is not okay when you're in this place. And that's where I've been very clear about the boundaries of my office. If you are okay behaving like this at home, that's mom and dad's problem. That's not my problem. We will not be behaving like this in here, or you are not welcome to come here anymore. Being able to let kids know what is okay in different places. At home, it is okay to go scream and cry in your bedroom. That is a very appropriate place to let your emotions out. But it's not okay to scream and yell at mom and dad at the dinner table. That is not an okay place to have these emotions. You can say, "I'm really upset. Can I take a break? Can I go to my room?" Those are the kinds of things you can do. So learning how we can teach the kids that life is not always great. We're not always happy. And we are going to have big feelings and big emotions. But here's how we show them and how we deal with them. And then this is how the adult will react when I show them in different ways. If I scream at them, I'm not going to get what I want. But if I tell them I'm upset and I need a break, then they will let me have what I want, which is to get away from whatever the situation is that upset me in the first place. So as adults, we have to set these boundaries and show these examples of, I'm really upset, so we're going to take a break from what we're doing, and I'm going to take a deep breath right now. I've literally said this to kids. I'm really upset with you right now, so I'm not talking to you for a minute. You can draw on the whiteboard for a sec. I need a moment to calm myself down before I talk to you. And I will really do that right in front of them. They need to see, what does it look like when somebody is upset and chooses not to have a huge reaction. They need to see, how do we get ourselves out of this big reaction and back to a calmer place. So much of what kids learn is from watching us. So if you can show them that you are upset and you use a strategy when you're upset to become less upset, then they learn to use that strategy. But that only works if you use a good strategy. If your strategy is to scream when you're upset, then they learn to scream when they're upset. Sometimes I will see kids have big reactions, and then I see their parents have a big reaction. And then I learn where that kid learned that, how to have those size of reactions. So if we can demonstrate how we can be upset, how we can have these troubles, and how do we deal with them, then kids can learn how they can deal with these really big emotions when they happen. We want kids to ask for flexibility in the most appropriate way. They can be crying, they can be upset, but they cannot be disrespectful toward me. They can tell me that they're really upset and need to have a moment before we get to work. Totally fine. They're allowed to be upset. If they're in here, life's hard. Something is really challenging for them or they wouldn't be coming to my office. And they're allowed to be upset about that. But they're not allowed to be rude to me. And they're not allowed to be disrespectful to me. This is where we learn that flexibility. We change our plan, but only if kids show it in a respectful way. Not when they're being disrespectful. Otherwise, that teaches them that being disrespectful gets them their way. And then they do it a lot more, which makes all of our lives miserable. So let's not do that. All right, that's it for today. Quickie recap. We learn that sometimes we have to flex. There are things out of our control in life, and there are times we really have to change our plan, but maybe we can adjust and stick to our plan, but do it slightly differently. How can we tweak our plan so that it makes more sense for the situation at hand when something unpredictable happens? We also talked about the fact that we only flex when kids are appropriately asking for that flex, not when they're screaming and demanding and misbehaving, because then that teaches them screaming, demanding, and misbehaving gets them what they want. And then your life is going to be like that for a very long time. And it might not be a big deal when they're 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, but wait till they're 15 and that is the routine they keep doing. Doesn't work out so great. I've seen it happen over the years where kids get away with murder when they're little, and then when they get big and they're not so cute anymore, nobody knows what to do to stop it. So if we can teach them things when they're young, things get better a lot faster. All right, that is it for today. I shall see you next time. I'm going to continue practicing my flexibility as nothing has gone to plan at all for the last 2 weeks. Have a fabulous day, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you want to learn even more about dyslexia, check out parnelloeducation.com/courses. See you next time.